This is the story of a Midwestern farmer who saw an opportunity to develop a new concept in automobile insurance and who had the courage to act in spite of the obstacles placed in his way. The farmer was George Mecherle. The business he founded is now known as the State Farm Insurance Companies. George Mecherle was born in 1877 on a farm 9 miles from Bloomington, Illinois. For the first 18 years of his life, George was a highly successful farmer. He began farming a rented farm, and eventually he'd saved enough to buy his own property. By the age of 40, he owned 480 acres of prime Illinois farmland, along with a collection of the most modern farm machinery and a prized herd of shorthorn cattle and Poland China hogs. At the age of 40, George Mecherle quit farming to move to Florida because his wife May had arthritis. The change didn't help, so they returned to Bloomington and lived off the rental income from their farmland. They had a comfortable standard of living, and his new lifestyle was considered normal for that era. Eventually, George became bored. Work was what he needed in order to feel fulfilled, so he took a job as a salesman for a small automobile insurance company. That job opened his eyes to the possibilities of developing new, low-cost insurance policies that would benefit the consumer and generate a generous profit. His ideas were not warmly received by his employer, and the discouraged Mecherle left to take a new job selling tractors. George was a successful tractor salesman, but he was still intrigued by his novel automobile insurance concepts. And despite the warnings of his friends, he finally decided to resign from his sales job to devote all of his time and talents to establishing a company to sell automobile insurance. The concept Mecherle had in mind was that of a company based on mutual principles, selling automobile insurance to farmers on a statewide basis. Mecherle believed that this form of organization and this method of restricting policyholders to a low-risk group of customers would significantly lower the cost of providing the insurance. George planned to get operating costs even lower by hiring the agents for mutual farm fire insurance organizations. These individuals could easily add auto insurance as a member service, and Mecherle could avoid the costs of trying to establish a full-time agency force. George expected to reduce operating costs even more by centralizing a number of functions usually performed by agents, such as billing and collecting. And he planned to reduce risks by requiring policies to be renewed every 6 months, thus allowing rates to be adjusted in the light of the previous 6 months' experience. These ideas were not entirely original with George Mecherle. He had seen the basic concept being practiced by the Tazewell County Farm Bureau, but Mecherle had the vision to see how the concept could be expanded and improved. He also had the courage to pursue the concept in spite of widespread criticism of his ideas. Friends and acquaintances pointed to a Bloomington insurance company that had recently gone bankrupt and warned George that he could suffer a similar fate. And when Mecherle traveled to Chicago to present his plan to Herman Eckern, known as the best insurance lawyer in Illinois, Eckern pointed out flaws in the plan and tried to discourage Mecherle from proceeding. But George Mecherle persisted. Eventually, he worked out a detailed operational plan whereby members of the Illinois State Association of Mutual Insurance Companies would invest in a new company to be called the State Farm Mutual Automobile Insurance Company. The new State Farm Company would then contract with Mecherle to be its general agent. On March 29, 1922, the new company was incorporated, and George Mecherle took to the country roads in search of clients. By the end of May, George and 4 fellow salesmen had obtained more than 400 applications for the company's automobile insurance. That was twice the number the state required before issuing a license. So, on June 8, 1922, the day after Mecherle's 45th birthday, the company held its organizational meeting and was in business to stay. Under George Mecherle's direction, the new insurance company grew rapidly. By 1924, there were over 3,800 policyholders. By 1931, there were over 369,000. Some of that growth was due to the fact that Mecherle had put together a program which offered the customer an unusually low cost, and the fact that Mecherle emphasized giving good service. But much of the growth was due to George Mecherle's propensity to strike out in new directions, to risk new ventures. Over the objections of many of the members of his board of directors, Mecherle expanded the auto insurance business to cover city dwellers in addition to farmers. Despite the misgivings of some directors, Mecherle expanded the company into other states. In 1929, the company's offerings were extended to life insurance. And in 1935, State Farm expanded into fire insurance. Mecherle's leadership was obvious. As one biographer put it,
George Mecherle was the dominant figure in all the affairs of the State Farm companies. In the early days, State Farm had been very nearly a one-man operation. His magnificent presence and dynamic personality towered over all who came to work for him. And even when the company had grown to the tremendous size it was in the last years of his life, this same personality and presence continued to shine over the entire organization. From his associates on every level, Mecherle demanded three things: willingness to work hard, faith in the organization, and loyalty to the spirit of State Farm. In return, he gave his associates what he demanded from them. He was no swivel chair commander, but the hardest worker of them all. His faith in the high purposes of State Farm as an organization dedicated to service was all-absorbing. And to the men and women who were loyal to him and his ideals, his loyalty was legendary.
Despite his dominant personality, Mecherle had an ability to recognize his own weaknesses and to hire people to do well that which he could not do well. His executive vice president, Adlai Rust, was one such person. As Mecherle's son Raymond once put it,
"Many times I've heard Dad say that together he and Adlai Rust made a darn good team. Each one seemed to understand the other one perfectly. Their different abilities just somehow meshed in a sort of happy harmony. Dad used to say, 'I'm not a detail man. I can see the broad, sweeping outlines of a plan, but Adlai, he's the one that sees the details. He sorts out the facts and makes it work.' They complemented each other. As a team, they were just unbeatable."
In 1937, 60-year-old George Mecherle handed over the presidency of the company to his son Raymond and assumed the office of chairman of the board. He made the change partly to prepare successor management and partly because he believed the time had come for him to spend most of his time planning the company's long-run strategy. What followed were two instructive case studies showing how an ambitious plan, backed by an executive determined to achieve the plan's goals, can force a company to make major organizational changes. The first case began in 1938, when the company adopted Mecherle's proposal to boost the number of automobile insurance policies in force to 1 million by 1944. Launched with the slogan, "A million or more by 44, the campaign soon fell behind schedule, and it appeared as if the goal was a bit too ambitious. But George Mecherle refused to compromise. He fought back by introducing national advertising for the first time in the company's history, working out special cooperative programs with banks that were making new car loans, and replacing the part-time agents with full-time State Farm representatives. These and other efforts made a difference. Automobile policies in force rose from 500,000 at the start of the campaign in 1938 to 1 million in 1944. The second case began in 1946 when the company set a goal of reaching $1 billion of life insurance by 1954. History repeated itself as sales fell behind schedule, and Mecherle, refusing to pare down the goal, turned to organizational change as a means of accelerating sales. The most important change was to introduce improved training programs for agents and to install more effective incentive systems. Once again, planning had brought about significant organizational change. George Mecherle did not live to see the success of his second campaign. He died in 1951. He left behind the world's largest automobile insurance company and one of the largest life companies. The Home Office had grown from a staff of 3 people in 1922 to an organization of 2,781 employees in 1951, including the 4 branch offices. Mecherle's success should inspire those who believe that consumerism can lead to business success. Mecherle put it this way:
"From year to year, we are learning that service carries with it its own reward, and to the extent and manner in which our service is dispensed, compensation in every form will flow to us."
But Mecherle's success also serves as a reminder that hard work is usually a prerequisite for excellent performance. Mecherle put it this way:
"A man has to live and sleep with his business if he wants to make a go of it. You have to take it home with you at night, so you can lie there in the darkness and figure out what you can do to improve it."
With that philosophy, George Mecherle authored one of America's finest business success stories.
And like a good neighbor, State Farm